Hey everybody, it's your girl Bondy Blue, and I want you to check out Bondy's Boutique and get some of my merch, y'all. I've added some new things like my mermaid cups and the mermaid tees, and also the Shake Them Tits mugs. All right, you asked for it and you got it. Check out Bondy's merch at Bondy's Boutique. Hey everybody, what's up? It's your girl Bondy Blue, and I am back for another Iyanla Fix My Life. All right, y'all. This episode was quite sad, but it had a really good ending, and it really touched me, y'all. I got emotional. I was tearing up on this one. So this episode was My Father Killed My Mother. And it's about this man named Bo who killed his ex-wife in a drunken high rage one night. And his son was there, his son Shane. And I'm not exactly sure if Shane's sister was like, because they didn't really talk to her much. They really only talked to the granddaughter, Tanae, and they talked to Wanda, Bo's sister, Bo, and then they talked to Shane. And there was another woman there that I'm thinking might have been Shane's sister, might have been Tanae's mother, if I'm correct, okay? Because I could possibly be wrong. I kind of missed a little bit of the beginning when they were introducing one another. But Tanae is Shane's niece, and she wrote to Iyanla because the issues that they have in their family are bleeding down the line, and she realizes that it's uncomfortable. The grandfather that she knows is not the father that Bo knows, and because of that, the family is not unified. You know, it's always this negative energy. It's always, you know, whatever their issues are bleeding through whenever they're around one another. And some of their issues are alcoholism, because Tanae explains that she also went through a time in her life where she was drinking heavily, drinking a lot, and her son is what changed that for her. And Iyanla really held her to the coals about being a good mother. And are you taking care of your son, but also are you raising him? Meaning, are you showing him an example of how he should be living his life instead of just telling him and then doing what you want to do? And when he grows up with some of the same pathology that's been passed down to you, you are responsible for that. So, you know, she just always wants the parents to keep in mind that they may be the child in the scenario, but they have children that they don't want to pass down these same negative things to, you know. And I love that she does that. But she doesn't know what happened. All they know is the grandfather killed the grandmother, but nobody knows why. Nobody knows really what caused it. When she sits down with Shane, Bo's son, the one who was there when his mother was killed, he doesn't know who he is, and he also doesn't know who his father is. He doesn't know what his father's story is as a man. And I love that Iyanla always tries to make the parents and the child have a conversation as two grown people and not as a child and a parent. Because when they have conversations as a child and a parent, there's always this air of, I'm trying to protect you or keep something from you, or the guilt. But when you talk to somebody like a grown-ass man, you're just telling them what the situation is, and that's what Iyanla asked of them. The only thing that Shane does know about his father was that he was on drugs. And the daddy was on some real drugs, okay? We ain't talking about, you know, drinking and smoking weed. We talking about heroin and cocaine, and sometimes doing them at the same time. So you can only imagine that, plus the alcoholism, how his mind was fucked up. So Iyanla sits down and she talks to Bo. And he tells her about all of the alcohol and drug use. And then we get into how he justified abusing Daisy, the grandmother. He justified abusing her because, oh, well, she hit me first. But now that he's gotten older and, you know, really thought back on the steps that took him to killing her, he realized that he was just making excuses, and that he had never seen his father abuse his mother, but the violence had to come from somewhere. So Iyanla brings in his sister, and they sit down and have a conversation about the fact that their father was abusive towards them and, you know, beat their ass. And you know, in the black community, corporal punishment is not always looked at as abuse. I think there's a very fine line, but I think that when parents have anger issues, they cross over that line sometimes. And they don't realize that you can't reprimand your child out of anger, because it's not coming from a place of trying to correct them. It's coming from a place of anger. So the child understands it and experiences it as abuse. And in this situation, it wasn't even a fine line. They daddy beat them with belt buckles. And like, first of all, you're not supposed to beat your kids with no fucking belt buckle, okay? You're supposed to have the belt buckle in your hand and you beat them with the strap. You don't beat them with the buckle, okay? This is not slavery. What the fuck is that, okay? The dad beat them with, you know, metal rods and sticks. He beat them, and he also shot at them at some point. And that takes the abuse to a whole nother level. So no, he didn't abuse their mother in front of them, but he abused them to such a great deal that they weren't happy at home. And Bo, you know, realized when he got older that his father did the best that he could, but still it had its effects on him. And by the time he was 15 years old, he had started using alcohol and drugs. So when 20 years old rolls around, he's 5 years deep in the traumatic experience of his childhood and the thorough, deep drug and alcohol abuse that he's been partaking in to deal with the things that have happened to him. And his sister Wanda seems to have dealt with her emotions and the things that happened to her a little bit differently. But when they're sitting there together and she starts to cry, and you know, he grabs on a hold to her, and there's kind of like this pushback, like they don't really want to lean into each other the way they should. And Iyanla's like, let your brother hug you. And when they do, you can just tell they needed it. I feel like so much in like the black community, people don't want to be affectionate towards one another, especially, you know, older black people. They see affection as weakness for some reason. And I also feel like a lot of people being taken advantage of sexually, affection is a confusing thing for some people. But in this moment, when they really leaned into each other, you could tell they needed it so much to just lean on one another in recognition of what they had gone through by the hands of their father as children. So the dad says that he doesn't remember the actual moment of killing his ex-wife, Daisy. He doesn't remember the moment of shooting her 3 times, from what I understand. But he knows he did it, and he feels the guilt of it. And he thinks he can forgive himself for the crime, but Iyanla makes him understand that you may not remember it, but your body remembers it. And you have to forgive whatever the cause was. Why did you go over there at 5 o'clock in the morning with the gun? Like, you have to understand what your motives were, so you can understand your motives and forgive yourself for why you went over there in the first place. Because you've forgiven yourself for what the fallout was, but you haven't forgiven yourself for the actual thought process leading up to it. So then Iyanla, the next day, the second day, Iyanla starts to handcuff his issues onto him. The abuse, the alcoholism, the drug use, the familiar violence, you know, the violence within his family, just, you know, handcuffing all of these different things on him. And I love when she does this as well, because it's an exercise in showing people how heavy the emotional scars that they have weigh on their soul. You know, sometimes you don't really understand how heavy you are until somebody puts something physical to it, because everything is always in your mind and in your heart, and you don't necessarily grasp the gravity of it until it's been put into something real and solid. And the way she put handcuffs on him for being a womanizer, because he was cheating on the mama, and eventually the mama found her another man, and he was jealous, and he went back to the house in a fit of rage, trying to convince her to come back to him, because he saw her as the love of his life. And I guess when she didn't feel like being bothered with him, the anger, the rage caused him to shoot her and kill her. And he says he doesn't remember it, but something tells me he does remember it. He just doesn't want to face that thought. He doesn't really want to lean into that, because if he does, then it'll all come back and the pain might be too overwhelming to bear. But I feel like there was a moment in there somewhere where it was bubbling under the surface, because that lip was quivering and you could see it. You could see that he wears the guilt and the shame of what he did on him. Now, he went to jail. He went to jail for it and left Shane without a father. So not only did you take his mother from him, but you also took his father away from him. And Iyanla has Bo and Shane sit down face to face. And Shane says, do you know what you did to me? And he says, I think I have an idea of what I did to you. He says, you hurt me. You took my mother from me. You killed my mother. And then you took my father away from me because of what you did. So you left me alone in this world. And y'all, let me tell y'all something. See that Shane was holding on to that shit so hard. He was, you know, his anger was showing through so tough throughout the whole process. But when we got to this moment, I could see that every time he would like wipe his face, it was him trying not to let the cry come out. Because he wanted to cry. Both of them were trying to not let that cry come out. And it's like, this is something that is devastating. How can y'all not cry? How can you not cry? You killed the love of your life because of your drug and alcohol abuse. And then put your child in a situation that you took all of the joy from him. And now you have to sit in his face and see the remnants of what you caused him. And then Shane, the son, having to look in his daddy's face and know that he needs to forgive his daddy, but also probably feeling like it's a betrayal to his mother in some way to forgive his dad for what he's done. And Iyanla had to really talk to him and tell him that his mom is all right where she is. And she just wants them to be all right. So they have to come to some type of forgiveness. And Bo says that, you know, I love you. I know it may not seem like it because of my actions, but I love you and I loved your mother. Your mother was the love of my life. And he says, you know, I carry the shame and the guilt of everything that happened. And Shane gets into how this was so hard for him. At one point, he wanted to kill his dad. And I'm sure he did. Growing up as a teenager, knowing what happened, I'm sure he had a visceral hate for his father. And that hate is also the fact that he probably loved his father and never really saw a good side of him because he was so busy doing drugs and being high and being drunk and being violent and being womanizing and putting his mother through pain. He was also very, very young. You know, at one point, Iyanla showed him a picture of him and his mother sitting together. And he was, you know, just smiling like a happy little baby. And just to see the grown man that was there, it just kind of seemed like that smile wasn't nowhere in there because of what had happened. And I broke down. I ain't gonna lie. I was in here crying. That shit was so hard to sit through and watch them try to have this conversation. And Shane asked why he came to the house with a gun. And he said he was mad, like I said, and wanted the mama to take him back. And he says he messed up. And then he explains how he was abused by his father. And Shane didn't know that about his dad. And Shane says that he needed to forgive Bo. He needs to forgive him. And then he tells him what he sees. And he sees that his father is sorry. And that's all he was looking for. He was looking for his dad to feel some type of remorse for what he'd done. And he saw it. And that daddy lip was trembling something awful, y'all. And he was like, I'm sorry. You know, Iyanla makes him stand up and hold his son's, you know, face in his hands. And he says, son, I'm proud of you because you a better man than I was. And I love you. And when he said that, y'all, that shit took me out. And he hugs him. And they stand up. And the way Shane grabbed the hold to his daddy, he said that was the first time he'd ever hugged his daddy. 40 years old. First time he'd ever hugged his daddy like that. And he hugged him and he finally released. He finally cried. And you could see it. And they just held on to each other real, real tight, y'all. And then I think it might have been like a day or so later, or maybe some time later. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame was between that day and the last day, when Iyanla took them out in the backyard and had them play catch with one another and throw horseshoes and just do what a father and son should have done, you know, because Shane played football and he said that he missed having a father there rooting for him. He felt the absence of his father in his life just like he felt the absence of his mother. And when they were able to go out there and be light and not have all of that heaviness on one another. They also went to like a casket that had the mother's picture in it. And, you know, the father apologized for not being there for their son. And, you know, for what he did to her. And he put their arms around each other and said goodbye to Daisy. Went out there and played ball with one another. and just smiled and took pictures and finally took a picture together. They didn't even have any pictures together as father and son. And y'all, it just really touched me. It really, really, really touched me that they finally had peace, because you can imagine how hard that must have been to go through. First of all, the daddy to realize that he'd allowed the anger and the issues to boil up to the point that he took somebody, not only just from him, but also from his son. And to actually have an opportunity to, in some way, mend it and to have a better relationship. And they said after that they speak to each other on a regular basis. Y'all, that really touched me, the fact that Shane was able to even forgive his father for that. Like, I feel like that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever seen anybody do on the island, is forgive their father for killing their mother. Like, yeah, that shit was crazy. That shit was really crazy. And I'm really happy that they were able to forgive one another. Like, even just talking about it and thinking about that makes me feel full, because people just don't give each other that type of forgiveness. You know, like, people say fuck their daddies for far less shit. You know what I mean? And he was able to forgive his daddy for something so terrible, but understanding that he got there because as a 20-year-old man, he was out of control. Y'all, that shit was crazy. But it was a good episode and I enjoyed it. I hope y'all enjoyed the recap and the review. And I'll see y'all in the next video, which will be Real Housewives of Atlanta. Peace and blessings, y'all. Peace and blessings.